Best Irish music on irishradio.org with Jerry Byrne.
Irish Radio, I'm Jerry Byrne. Been speaking to many of the great, the good and the talent of music in Ireland now. My next guest is a gentleman who's been performing for many, many years in the Showbands and many, many bands right across the Emerald Island, indeed further afield. Known affectionately as the Showband drummer from Dungannon in County Tyrone. I'm delighted to say hello to Vinny O'Donnell. Vinny, how are you?
Hi, not so bad, Jerry. How are you doing yourself?
Not bad at all. Vinny, listen, you were for a long, long time with all of the show bands. So when did it all start off?
It started off back in the 60s, Jerry, would you believe? I was actually working over in the Vauxhall Motorworks in London. I had done a bit of drumming, a bit of pop drumming with a friend of mine. He had a group and I would have went with him to some of the jazz clubs around London too, and I would have sat in for a few tunes. Didn't even own a drum kit. But anyway, to make a long story sideways, as the man says, I came home on a short holiday, and one day the door got knocked. It was a lad called Terry Daines. He was the male singer eventually when Dawn Night in the Casuals, and he said there had been a new band starting up in Monaghan. Somebody had mentioned about me being a drummer. Would I go up? They were doing auditions. I said I'll go up for the run, up for the crack anyway, and then went in, and I can remember the first number. It was, remember the old Seekers, Word of Our Own? I think Declan recorded it in more recent years. And the Searchers walk in the room, and I drummed them, and then went out of the hall, went over to the wee pub across the street for a jar, and then after the auditions was over, the bass player who died there a couple of years ago, Colin McQuaid, he says, if you're interested, the job's yours. And I had more or less just went up for the run, and I says, God, I have to go back to the Vauxhall Motorworks in Luton. And Pat Campbell had used to be the Pat Campbell Showband. It was Pat was starting this new band, the Casuals. So he says to me, could you ring the foreman and could you pull us out for the weekend? So, Jerry, I done that, and I was there ever since, up till 40 years professionally at it. I stayed then, and then that was the formula of Dawn Night and the Casuals, and that would have been the first show band ever was with.
Right, that's how it all started off. Now Dawn Night and the Casuals were incredibly successful.
They were very successful. They were a very good band. They had trumpet, tenor, baritone, sax, trombone. You know, the usual full show band lineup. Dawn, a very attractive girl, a good singer. You know what I mean? And it was very successful. And then, like everything else, the band sort of ran its course, and then it broke up. And from the remnants of the Casuals, Big Mutt, who was also a singer and saxophonist in the band, the Casuals, we formed a new band called Big Mutt and the Bonanza. And then after that sort of faded after a few years. You know what bands is like, you move on. And then in between years, I was with Mary Lou, I was with Brandon Quinn, right up then through the years to, you know, Brian Call, and then Declan Nerney, Mick Flavin, right up then till I more or less retired from it, you know.
Right, that's a long career. I mean, some of the bands in there you're involved with. You were involved with Colette and Jive Beat Country, also Evan McDonald.
Yes. I had been with Kieran McGilligan. I left here. It's very hard memorising them all when they're so quick. No, I sort of got fed up with the travelling. This was how Colette and Jive Beat came about. Colette and Declan would have played support to us in different venues around County Down. And I thought Declan was a brilliant guitar player. Colette, a good rhythm player, had a great way with her on stage. And we got to know each other very well. You know, they would have loved to get into the band scene. I wanted to get away from all the travelling. So we decided we'd form, you know, the remnants was there. Declan, a good lead player, myself a drummer, Colette rhythm. So we got keyboard player and bass player in, and we formed Colette and Jive Beat, you know. And we're only playing locally. And then I got a phone call from Eamon McCann. He says, would you have known Bob Condon, who managed Sean Cuddy in different bands?
Indeed I do, yes.
Well, he was running the gig down in County Meath. I think it was Johnstown House. But anyway, Eamon McCann rang me, he says, look, Robert and his eldest been a mix-up. I think Robert was out in Nashville and Bob was stuck for a band that night. So he wanted to know, would we do it? He says, look, Vinny, come down. He says, I'll put up the poster, apologise to the crowd, you know. So we went, we done the gig and went down very, very well. And Bob rang me a couple of days after it. I thought he was going to give us a date, but he liked what he seen, and he was very keen on managing Colette and Jive Beat. And that's how it came about. And it was a very good band, you know. And we've done a lot of 60s stuff. We've done a lot of Cliff Richard and the Shadow stuff with a lot of the bands we weren't doing. Revived a lot of his stuff. And the whole secret is, I think, Jerry, is keep the people dancing and playing a good, lively programme and stuff that the people know. It might sound cliched, like, you know what I mean, but it works, you know. No, up to Colette and JP, then after that, I went to Vinny O'Donnell. And then that was what Yvonne then left Yvonne to go to Jimmy Buckley. Then the wife took ill, and it was only a few weeks with Jimmy, and I just decided, no, that's me. I had me David, you know, and that was more or less it, Bob, you know. But there were great times, especially back in the Showband days, you know. I'm sure you know yourself, you've heard many stories about it, and, you know, it's amazing the crowds that was in those halls that there wasn't even a bar in, you know.
Indeed, it was truly incredible. It was absolutely phenomenal stuff, no question or doubt. And you know, the thing about it was, I mean, you were involved with particularly with Dawn Knight and the Casuals, and afterwards, indeed, with Brenton Quinn and Brian Call. That was a sort of a Showband heyday, really, when you know, back in the 60s and the early 70s, the huge crowds in these ballrooms was just astounding.
Especially when you see photographs of it, you know what I mean? It's well, the normal crowds, like I remember Brian telling us a story about the Plattermen way back before he formed the Buckaroos, that Jim Aiken was the manager then, and they had a meeting and said, lads, we better book up here. We only had 1,400 people last night. Now imagine that for today's crowds. Like, he says, we only had 1,400, where a lot of bands would have been drawing 1,800, 2,000 people. Do you know? And that sounds funny nowadays. Like, my God, you know yourself, Jerry, you know, 500 people in a hall now is classed as a good crowd, you know. Indeed.
It's incredible to only have 1,400 people. Does seem just absolutely incredible. It really does. And the other thing about it was, I mean, back in those early days, Vinny, in the Showbands and that, you played in the marquees and all of those. I mean, those marquees were huge and they were absolutely jam-packed.
Jam-packed, and especially on a wet night, there was a great sound of the band, especially you're listening outside. Do you know what I mean? But like some of the marquees, I'm sure every singer and bandman would tell you, some of the stages had left a lot to be desired. They could have been tilted to one side, and I remember changing one night on a bit of corrugated tin, you know, behind the stage, like, stand changing, and there was no facilities or nothing, like, but back then, you know, it was the accepted thing, you know what I mean? Nowadays, you frown at it, you know what I mean? But there was great camaraderie and crack and all, and, you know, as I say, no bars in the places or nothing. This was long before the hotels opened up to the band and cabaret scene, you know.
Indeed, you know? Indeed it was. Yes, it was truly astounding. But you also worked yourself in the bands. You also did you know, cabaret work as well afterwards.
Oh, I also played in a band, not the original College Boys show band, but it was we got the name, the College Boys Mark II type thing, and we played a lot of the cabaret clubs around Belfast and Derry and that, you know. And then have been sit down cabaret lounges. You know, there's a couple of great clubs around Belfast. The Star Club in Ardine now was a great club, you know. And I enjoyed that scene, and I love the theatre scene. You know, the dance scene, playing to the dancers, is a totally different scene. I found, like, you know, you would drive it out more when they were out jiving and all. And as a theatre scene, the whole sound has to be kept nice and low, and, you know, it was different program altogether to playing for the dancers. You know what I mean?
Indeed so.
Uh-huh.
The drummer in a band is always so highly regarded amongst sort of all musicians as you're the guy who keeps the time.
Well, they call us the backseat drivers, and that's meant for complimentary. No, actually, often hear the saying in pop music or any type of music that the band's only as good as its drummer. You know what I mean? I don't mean that in an egotistical way, but at the end of the day, to quote the great Brian Call, Brian used to always say, the name of the game's dancing, the name of the game's rhythm. You know what I mean? And it's like in any music, suppose the drummer's the timekeeper, you know what I mean? Like, that brings to mind the great big Tom and the mainliners like Ronnie Duffy, Ronnie the Magic Beat. I loved to sit and watch Ronnie years ago before I joined bands, He had that lovely laid-back beat, you know what I mean? And they had that beat and that sound, And, as you say, the drummer, all musicians, they're a team. If you work as a team, but the drummer's supposed to be the foundation of it all,
Indeed. So, and I know exactly what you're saying about Ronnie Duffy, and it was definitely the band with the magic beat, no doubt about it.
The late Brian Finlay with the Avens, a nice drummer too,
Indeed.
You see, you got drummers, poppy drummers and all, was great showmen, would have done the drum solos and all, and that was great. That showman, it was great to watch that. But then you get the other different type of drummer who's just nice and steady, does what has to be done, plays for the band. They're every bit as important as the flashy drummer, you know what I mean?
Indeed so. And it must be very different. You must have a very different take when you're playing drums on stage, because you're the guy at the back who's sort of looking out. You can see things from a completely different angle than the singer out front or the guitarist out front.
True. It's after you see a lot of things and all, comical things, and but back in them days again, before the advent of the relief group, you played, Jerry, from 9 to 2. You know what I mean? It was a long night, and the band would have split up halfway through. Used to call 3 on, 3 off. And backstage for a smoke or whatever, maybe a drink or a cup of tea, whatever it was. And one half the band would have played, then they could have come back on and replaced it. The other 3 would have went off then. But it was a long night from 9 to 2. And you were playing, and they were all in the bars, and you were playing more or less in an empty hall. And then the crowd started coming in, the crowds all started coming in around maybe 11 o'clock or so. But for some reason you had to play from 9, it was advertised 9 to 2. Then the relief band come on the scene, and that was a hard too, So you basically would have done the 2 hours then, 11 to 1 or 9 to 2, whatever the case may be,
Yes, indeed. It was a very, very long night. I mean, for a few musicians, 5 hours of playing was when we look back at it today, it seems absolutely crazy.
Yeah. But funny enough, it's like anything. It was the done thing. You knew you had to do it, and when you look back on it now, you say, how do you do that? But, you done it at the time, and 9 times out of 10 you enjoyed it too, Like, if you have the crowd with you, Jerry, and they're enjoying the dance and if the thing's buzzing, you can play all night, you know what I mean? And you get that adrenaline buzz, Once you know that crowd is enjoying it, and the memories that I would have, I'm sure you remember the rostrum used to be up in Iron Santa, in the Galtymore.
Indeed,
yes.
The
drummer.
Yes.
When you're sitting up on that and you're looking down at about 1,500 people, jiving to that band, it's you know what I mean? It's a great buzz. It's a great buzz to watch that,
Indeed.
And them some of the memories I hold on to,
Indeed, it's absolutely fantastic. And a fantastic life. And you've certainly, all over those years, you've covered some miles.
Oh, as I said in one of the tunes I done, they set the beat for 1,000,000 feet. But the miles too, when you think of it, like we used to call them, a dartboard nightmares. Like the managers just threw a dart at the mop, and that's where you went, as was said jokingly. But Although, and back then, Jerry, there was no motorways, and no all-night filling stations or nothing like that,
Indeed.
You know,
It was a
you
different...
got the land of Dublin. There was a wee cafe down by the Liffey down by the quays. It was called the Night Bite, and you pull in there about maybe 5, 6 in the morning, coming from the Lake of Kerry or Cork, and you see all the bands, all the Showband bands parked along it, and you went in, and all the different bands was there. They used to do lovely soup and sausage sandwiches. Man, it was great to sit down, and you would have chatted to all the different band men. There was great camaraderie, swapping numbers. Here, there's a guy there, ring him, you get a date, he runs a venue. And there was great out crack. It was great times,
Indeed, it certainly was. It was a totally, completely, and utterly different world to today. As you said, there was certainly no late night filling stations and no motorways or anything like that.
No. But that's progress. That's the way it goes. Like the bands nowadays, the gear and all the technology now, and all the videos you've out now promoting the records, and it's all first class Hollywood stuff. Brilliant stuff. It's light years away from there at outlet, But it's good to see. There's some great young talent coming through and all, now, but that's the way it is,
Indeed, time changes. Well, listen. When you retired, there was a big gala night held for you in the Marina Centre, Ballyronan, I should say, and you had a big night there.
Yeah, I tell you what that was. John McCabe, who managed Vinny O'Donnell, he happened to say to me, "Well, John would have knew me away over the years." He says, "Vinny, you've been coming up now 40 years professional in the business. What are you going to do?" I says, "John, what am I going to do?" I says, "I'm a drummer, not a singer. Now, what am I going to do?" So he says, "We'll come up with some idea." Do you know what I mean? And then I can't remember. I think maybe it was Declan Nearly. Says, "Why don't you get a song about all the halls that you played in?" So there was a man down in Carrickfergus, deceased now, God love him, Bill Allen. His daughter Barbara Allen would have been a singer. She used to present a country show on BBC TV with Brandon Quinn. Lovely girl. But anyway, Bill wrote this song called The Showband Drummer. Right? So I was never, I hear going to hear a microphone, Jerry. I seen one night down in the Carrickdale in Dundalk. All the guys was way upstairs in the hotel changing, and somebody come up to me, even to read out a car number in the car park through the mic. I wouldn't do it. I wasn't one of the boys to read it out, so you may guess what I was like into a recording studio. But anyway, God rest Gene Stewart, we're up to the studio, and Oni Smith was the engineer. To say, Oni, I have a song here, so I'll give it a whirl, say if it sounds a disaster, let me know. So anyway, it turned out okay. And then what I done was all the bands that I played with, most of them anyway, my personal favourite tracks, and I think 3/4 of the tracks I would have drummed on myself. I done that, and I sang the opening number, and the number at the end, Do You Remember? I think it was a Finbar Fury number. It talked about, as time goes by, reminiscing and all that. And I done that, and I brought out the CD, and the launch night was in the Marina in Ballyronan, down there on the shores of Loch Ness, and it was a great night, a brilliant night,
That is
and Brandon Quinn and Brian and Gene stood all, Yvonne O'Donnell, they all supported me well on the night, you know what I mean? Hugo compared the chauffeurs and all,
Excellent, excellent. It was a great sort of finish off to an illustrious career on the road as a drummer.
Well, it was a career. I enjoyed it. You know what I mean? And what more can I say? I look back at those good memories, those rough times too. You know what I mean? And sadly, when you do look back and you think of all the lads that's passed on, there's like Seamus McMahon. Tom, Brian, Gene Stewart, it's the whole thing just evolves, and it's sad too that we've lost them, you know what I mean? They're all great characters, all very funny characters,
Indeed. They were, as well as huge talents in music. They were definitely great characters with their own unique personalities and their own unique ways with them. And no question doubt about that. You've certainly, Vinny, you've lived the life of the show bands and the bands and the drummers and all the rest of it. And in the end up even recording a song, which probably something you never thought you'd do. But listen, well done on it all.
Yeah, no, there was some good tracks on that album, Brian and Brandon Quinn, and Vinny O'Donnell night. It was a good album. It was a one-off, Jerry. It was a bit of a milestone, a bit of a souvenir thing. You know what I mean? And as I say, the launch night, it got good airplay. That Showband drummer, believe it or not, got good airplay. But the funny thing is with it, who would have get to write the sleeve notes? Then I thought back at the time I had spent down in Longford between Mick Flavin and Declan. I had a flat down in Longford. And then I thought, God, Albert Reynolds. Because I remember when Albert opened his first ballroom in the Cloudland in Ruski, I remember Albert doing the cloakroom, And I got to know Albert's driver very well down in Longford and his secretary. So I rang up and asked Albert, would he do the sleeve notes for me? And he read a nice wee thing. So the boys was called me. It's not every singer gets the P-Shock to write the sleeve notes on an album,
Indeed.
I don't know if you have the album, Jerry, but the cover of it sort of come out, folded out like a mini poster, and every song that was on it, there was a wee story attached to it, along with the photographs of the artist, And if any lying about it, mate, to sign you over when you haven't got one,
Indeed. So that would be great. But it was, it's a lovely. I have to say, it's a lovely memory and lovely keepsake of a one-off night which occurred. Vinny, listen, it's been lovely. It's been lovely to chat to you. It's been fascinating to hear the stories of an incredible career down through the years. Listen, thanks a million for talking to me. And listen, I wish you...
Jerry, thanks very much for ringing me and all. You know what I mean? As you know yourself, Jerry, if you were sitting here now with me with a cup of tea or something, we'd talk into the wee small hours about Showband stories. The short space of time we had there. There's some funny stories you could talk all night about, and things that are on the road, and different ups and downs with the band scene. But it was good to talk to you, and thanks for ringing me. I hope I'll give you sort of an inclination of what them days were like.
Absolutely fascinating, Vinny. Thanks a million.
And tell you, Jerry, tell all your fans out there, and tell all the men and women at Soldier during that period of the show bands, I give them a great thumbs up and hello to them all. They've all stories to tell too,